Snow whispered against the flayed man banners that ringed the battlements of Winterfell, soft as a confession and twice as cold. Inside those soot-stained walls Theon Greyjoy, who had once strutted as Prince of Pike and now cowered as Reek, stood in the drafty corridor that led to the kennels. Ramsay's hunting hounds bayed from their straw-strewn pens, sensing meat, but tonight they would have to wait. Tonight Theon's trembling fingers closed about a rust-flecked key he had stolen from the maester's ring. He balanced its weight in his palm as though it were his own heart, beating again after long captivity. The world smelled of tallow and pine smoke. Every torch cast orange welts of light that seemed to sear the walls. Ramsay would skin him alive if he were caught. Yet the thought of Sansa Stark, Lady of Winterfell and sister to the brother Theon had betrayed, burned hotter than fear. He saw her yesterday in the Godswood, eyes bright with silent ice as she brushed her gloved fingertips across the black bark of the heart tree. She had looked at him, really looked, and in that gaze Theon had glimpsed the man he used to be, the boy who laughed with Robb Stark and dreamed of proving himself to Ned. Tonight he would answer that memory. He padded across the yard, snow crunching beneath slippered feet. The night was cloud-choked, moon-faint, but that suited him well. Guards stamped their boots at the main gatehouse, too intent on warming hands over a brazier to notice a skulking shadow. The kennelmaster was drunk in the mews, sprawled beside a cask. Theon stepped over the man's splayed legs, heart hammering. One nostril caught the sour tang of ale and turned away. Ramsay's dogs would not be loose tonight, not if the drowned god still watched. Down the servants' staircase he crept, passing rough-hewn doors and iron sconces. The key found its lock on the third attempt, teeth grinding until the bolt slid back with a cough of rust. He eased the door open. Sansa reclined on a narrow bed beneath a threadbare blanket, hair the hue of polished copper spilling across her shoulder. Candlelight framed her features, and for a moment Theon froze, robbed of breath. She looked like Catelyn Stark reborn. Same high cheekbones, same quiet fury, but there was something harder now, forged by pain. She did not startle when he entered. Instead her gaze sharpened, as though she had known he would come. "Have you decided, Theon?" she asked, voice low yet steady. She kept calling him by his name, never Reek, as if determined to speak the man into being. "I have," he breathed. The words fluttered from cracked lips. "We leave tonight. The North remembers. Let us give them reason." She rose, pulling a wool cloak about her shoulders. The blanket slid to the floor. No chains bound her. Ramsay liked his prey unshackled, but invisible fetters had held her fast until now. Theon passed her a coil of rope and a dagger. "For climbing the outer wall," he whispered, "and for any man who tries to stop us." Together they slipped through servants' corridors until they reached a postern gate rarely used since the days when Winterfell still belonged to Starks. Theon wedged a chisel into centuries-old ice, sealing the door. With each strike he feared the crack of footsteps behind him, but none came. At last the slab of ice broke like brittle bone and the door groaned outward, revealing a night whipped by swirling flakes. Beyond the gate lay the ruins of the old stables, toppled in Theon's sack of the castle. Now the stones served as cover. Sansa squeezed through the gap first, cloak blending with snow. Theon followed, shoulders brushing icy stone. On the far side, dim torchlight pooled around the kennel tower. Everywhere else lay shadow. They crouched, breath pluming white. A horn sounded on the ramparts. Not the alarm, just a change of watch, but it startled Theon so sharply his knees buckled. Sansa clasped his arm, firm and reassuring. "I trust you," she murmured. He had not heard those words since boyhood, and they steadied him more than steel. They skirted the collapsed outer wall where frost-slick stones gaped like broken teeth. Theon led her toward the mill gate, long abandoned. A narrow cleft allowed two to pass. Through it unfurled the King's Road, ghost pale under winter's shroud. Wolves howled far off in the forest, an omen or perhaps a welcome. They walked until torchlight faded behind them. Theon's breaths grew ragged. His years as Reek had left him half-starved, strength sapped. Yet each step felt lighter than the last. Sansa moved with silent purpose, boots crunching softly. Above, the sky split with stuttering flakes, settling on hair and cloak until she seemed wrought from snow herself. Hours passed beneath the trees of the wolfswood. Branches bowed beneath powdery loads, sighing as wind shook them free. The silence felt immense, broken only by distant hoot of an owl. They followed deer paths southwest, where rumor placed Stannis Baratheon's encampment. Theon hoped to find shelter there. If anyone would honor a Stark claim to Winterfell, surely it was the king who wielded justice like a sword. But first they must evade pursuit. By dawn, a company of Bolton riders would scour the wood. Theon guided Sansa to an abandoned crofter's cottage, half hidden beneath a snow-blanketed mound. Smoke-black rafters sagged above a stone hearth. They barred the sagging door behind them, then collapsed onto musty rushes. Frost rimed the inside windows, their breaths fogged glass. Theon knelt beside the hearth, flint striking until sparks kissed dry tinder. Tiny flames unfurled, licking twigs. Soon a modest fire gnawed the dark. Sansa eased closer, arms wrapped about knees. "Did you truly kill my brothers?" she asked, voice almost fragile. The question stabbed deeper than any of Ramsay's blades. Theon shook his head, throat tight. "I killed 2 farm boys, burned their bodies so that all would fear. I wanted a crown forged of lies." Regret pooled in his gut, acid hot. "Your brothers live, I swear." Sansa bowed her head, shoulders trembling. Whether from relief or grief he could not tell. Yet when she looked up, a tear traced her cheek. "If Bran and Rickon breathe, then hope does too," she whispered. She stretched out a hand and rested it atop his. Her palm was warm despite the chill. He felt forgiveness bloom there, timid and astonishing. Outside, night ebbed into a bruised dawn. Gray light filtered through cracks in the roof. They would need food, warmer clothes, and a plan. But for the first time in years, Theon Greyjoy slept unafraid, curled beside a fire he had kindled, guarding a Stark he had saved. Daylight broke pale and pitiless. They ate stale oatcakes from Sansa's satchel and drank melted snow. Theon's stolen dagger served as tool for slicing kindling. Around noon, they resumed their trek through knee-deep drifts. Frost clung to eyebrows and lashes, ghosting their faces. By evensong, they reached a frozen stream lined with white-capped stones. Theon's numb toes ached. He had traded his Bolton blues for a drab cloak scavenged from the croft, but the fur was patchy. Sansa, though shivering, pressed on without complaint. Courage, Theon thought, is quiet as falling snow. At the next bend, they nearly blundered into 3 figures emerging from the trees. Spearwives in patched furs, cheeks scarred with the weeping woman cuts of the free folk. The first woman leveled an obsidian-tipped spear at Sansa's breast, eyes as blue-gray as storm seas. Theon raised both hands. "Friends," he gasped. "We flee the Boltons." A fourth figure stepped from behind an alder trunk, cloaked in black and brown, raven feathers woven through braids of midnight hair. Rowena, once companion to Mance Rayder and now scout for Stannis' host, peered at Sansa with wary curiosity. "You're no wildling. I am Sansa Stark," she declared, lifting her chin. Snowflakes dusted copper strands, glittering. "The Boltons stole my home. Help me take it back." It was not a plea but a proclamation. Rowena's lips twitched. "Stannis likes lost causes dressed as justice," she muttered. She signaled her spearwives to lower weapons. "Come, little wolves. The king will want your tale." Under their escort, Sansa and Theon tramped through forest night. A purple dusk settled, and campfires flickered ahead like fallen stars. Baratheon banners, crowned stags riven by crimson sunsets, snapped against frigid wind. Soldiers in mail trudged between tents, breath fumes rising. War horses stamped and snorted. Somewhere a smith's hammer rang. At Theon, then Sansa. But alliances can sweeten. She knelt, fist to heart. "For the sake of my brother's honor, the Kraken bends." Stannis accepted with curt nod. Wind moaned around them, but the note carried something new, promise. Davos unrolled parchment bearing proclamations. When he announced Theon's name, the yard hushed. Theon of houses Greyjoy and Stark, by right of blood and deed, is declared Warden of the Wolf's Shore, charged with guarding the northern coast against Ironborn raids and securing trade. Theon's heart pounded. He had been many things: hostage, prince, turncloak, reek, but never warden. He knelt before Sansa, who draped a white-trimmed gray cloak over his shoulders. "Rise, Lord Greyjoy," she said, voice ringing clear. He rose into a storm of cheers. Stark men beating spear against shield, Ironborn clashing axes. Snowflakes danced around him, glittering in dawn's pale light. For the first time since childhood, he felt the world align. The wind smelled not of ash but possibility. Days bled into weeks as Winterfell healed. Carpenters replaced broken beams. Masons patched mortar scarred by siege. Fires glowed in every hearth, smoke curling from chimneys like warm breath. Sansa held court in the Great Hall, dispatching ravens to Manderleys, Umbers, and Karstarks. Messages bore her signature. The dire wolf returned. Many houses answered with pledges of men and grain. Theon rode daily along the walls, inspecting new ballistae positioned to repel flight or flame. Yara trained shield maidens in the yard. Their laughter rang like copper bells. Stannis lingered as Lord Protector, his presence a whetstone for discipline. Yet it was Sansa whose quiet authority shaped Winterfell's rebirth. Farmers praised her for granting seed from stores, orphans for warm cloaks sewn in the Queen's Guard Tower. One night in the Godswood, beneath branches heavy with snow, she found Theon kneeling before the heart tree. Red sap bled like tears from its carved face. Theon's breath fogged in prayer. She waited until he rose. "I asked the old gods if redemption ends or begins," he told her. They answered with silence. "Silence is sometimes permission to write your own ending," Sansa said. She gestured to the crypts. "Our ancestors watch but seldom speak." They walked past moon-washed headstones. Theon paused before Ned Stark's statue. Stone eyes gazed sternly, yet Theon felt warmth in them tonight. He laid a single iron coin at the base, tribute from the Isle's symbol of service. Suddenly distant horns blared from the east wall. They shared a glance before hurrying above the battlements. On the horizon, icy winds tore clouds to reveal a column of torches winding south across the King's Road. Hundreds, perhaps thousands. Davos arrived, cloak flapping. Ravens report Jon Snow rides with wildlings toward Winterfell. He means to join us. His weathered face creased in cautious hope. Sansa's voice caught. "My brother." Theon remembered Jon's steady hand teaching him sword forms in Winterfell's yard. A knot loosened in his chest. "He'll want your hearth, and our spears. The realm is changing. We must change with it." Snow began to fall, thicker now, swirling around torches like embers caught in winter gale. Sansa brushed flakes from her lashes and faced north, back straight, eyes ablaze. "Then let us prepare a feast worthy of a brother returned." Theon smiled, small but true. Behind them, the ancient walls of Winterfell glowed golden in torchlight, a beacon in gathering storm. For the first time in many winters, songs drifted from the hall. Not dirges of loss, but ballads of hard-won hope. The North remembered, and in remembering, forgave. Jon arrived 3 days later at dusk. Black cloak rhymed with rhyme, wildlings at his heels. Sansa embraced him before the gates, tears freezing on cheeks. Jon's voice broke as he whispered her name. Snow swept around them, but they stood unmoving, siblings reunited amid the ruin their world had become. Inside, torches blazed and mead flowed. Giants shared benches with farmers. Free folk laughed with Karstark bannermen. The ceiling rafters rang with music, harp, drum, and reedy pipes weaving tunes older than the Seven. Theon watched from the shadows, content. He had spoken little since Jon's arrival, uncertain of welcome. Yet as the night deepened, Jon approached, tankard in hand. "You saved my sister," he said simply. His eyes, gray as dawn over the wall, held neither anger nor pity, only understanding. "Thank you," Theon could not speak. Jon clasped his forearm, grip firm. "Fight beside me when the real war comes. Then all debts are paid." "I will," Theon croaked. They drank together while outside snow piled high against Winterfell's walls. Wind howled, but fires burned bright. Hope, Theon realized, was not a roaring blaze but a quiet, stubborn ember, guarded and fed until it warmed winter's longest night. Spring did not come. Instead, white winds drove deeper, burying villages and choking passes. Yet ravens carried dire warnings. Dead men walked beyond the wall, an army of silent frost. Jon spoke of ancient tales, blades of dragonglass, and children of the forest. In the great hall's flickering gloom, lords debated, fear souring their voices. Stannis slammed a fist on the table. "Words will not stop ice and shadow. Steel and fire will." He eyed Melisandre, whose ruby pulsed, but her gaze drifted to Theon, and in its depth he saw worry. Perhaps for him, perhaps for them all. Yara urged reinforcing the coast. If dead things crossed seas on drift ice, the Isles would be first to bleed. Davos counseled diplomacy with southern crowns. Dragons had returned in Essos, wielded by a queen who freed slaves. Through it all, Sansa listened, absorbing counsel like fertile earth drinks rain. Nights she walked the ramparts, Theon at her side, discussing grain stores, levy numbers, and alliances still needed. She stood taller now, voice clear in council, and men listened. One eve beneath lanterns swaying in icy gusts, she turned to Theon. "You once boasted that Greyjoys do not sow. Yet here you are, sowing seeds of peace." Her smile warmed him more than any hearth. "I have learned that a man's boast is wind, his deeds the soil." She considered a moment. "Then may you harvest a better tomorrow." They shared a silence broken only by creak of timbers and distant growl of wind. Somewhere below, smiths quenched blades in oil. Hiss and steam rose like dragon's breath. Winterfell prepared for wars yet unseen. Days later, a raven arrived bearing news that changed the game once more. Balon Greyjoy, Lord of the Iron Islands, was dead, fallen from a rope bridge during a storm. Euron crows I claimed lordship, promising to build 1,000 ships and seize the world. Yara's jaw tightened as she read the parchment. "My uncle will drown the Isles in blood." Stannis looked to Theon. "Your sister needs a fleet loyal to her. Take men, sail to Pike, and secure those harbors. The Iron Islands may yet stand with us against darkness." Theon swallowed. The thought of returning to the salt-sprayed towers of his childhood filled him with dread and longing. But he nodded. I'll not let Euron's madness doom us." Sansa stepped forward. "You go with Winterfell's blessing," she said. Around her throat gleamed a direwolf brooch newly forged. "Bring back what ships you can. The North will remember your courage." He left 2 days later, riding south to White Harbor where Manderley shipwrights readied swift cogs. Yara accompanied, bearing ironborn reavers who had sworn to her after Winterfell. Snow fell thicker still, but they cut through storms like arrows. At White Harbor's docks, Theon paused atop the gangway, looking back once more toward Winterfell's distant towers hidden beyond gray horizon. He wondered if redemption ended or began with this voyage. Splintered masts creaked overhead, gulls shrieked, and salt wind whipped cloak against armor. He squared shoulders and descended into the belly of the ship. As ropes were cast off and oars dipped into icy water, Theon felt the Kraken's call stir in his blood. Yet beneath it beat new purpose. A man bound not by salt and stone alone, but by snow and wolf as well. House Greyjoy would rise anew, redeemed not by iron price alone, but by honor earned beneath northern sky. The ship's prow turned west, slicing white-capped waves under brooding heavens. Somewhere ahead, Pike's jagged silhouette waited. Somewhere behind, Winterfell's fires burned against the dark. Between them stretched a sea both unforgiving and full of promise, as vast and uncertain as the road of atonement itself. And Theon Greyjoy, once prince, once turncloak, now Lord Reclaimer, sailed upon it with wind in his hair and hope, quiet, stubborn hope, anchored in his heart. Salt wind howled through the rigging like a choir of ghosts, the lines thrumming as if strung by invisible fingers. The gull-streaked sky above Theon Greyjoy was pewter, the sea below a bruise that went on forever. Snow melted the moment it hit the deck, leaving slick rivulets that hissed into the scuppers. Somewhere aft, Yara shouted orders, her voice hard as flint. Ironborn reavers hauled at the mainsail, boots thudding across damp planks. The cog maiden's reprieve cut westward on a beam reach, her square sail bellied with frigid air, each swell lifting her bowsprit toward a horizon that always seemed to retreat. Theon stood at the starboard rail, gloved hands curled on the salt-white wood. He tasted brine on his lips and thought how strange it felt to be at sea again, unbound and unafraid. The ocean had once been his cradle, then his prison, then his exile. Now it was the road to redemption or ruin. The choice would be his. The deck rose beneath him, creaked, and fell away. He felt the old stagger in his legs. Not seasickness, but the uneasy balance of a man who had forgotten the sea's rhythm and must relearn it or drown. A shrill whistle split the air. Yara was striding toward him from the helm, black hair snapping like cables. She wore layered mail and boiled leather beneath a heavy cloak of mottled gray sealskin. Silver kraken clasps bit into the fur at her shoulders. "Wind's freshening," she observed, planting boots beside him. "We'll make lord sport by dawn, if the gods don't piss on us." "Dawn," Theon echoed, voice low. Ahead lay the Iron Islands, jagged teeth of black rock rising from storm-racked waters. Pike would be 7 towers on 7 spires, rope bridges swaying above a frothing chasm, waves exploding into white fountains against basalt. The very thought of it squeezed his chest. He had left Pike as a hostage boy bound for Winterfell and returned a crowing victor with Robb's banner once, arrogant and hungry. Now he went back stripped of every pretense, bearing Northern promise and Baratheon sanction, and Sansa Stark's faith. "You look like a man facing the rope," Yara muttered. "Speak your mind, little brother." He clutched the rail until knuckles ached. "Does it ever feel like ghosts wait for you on those rocks? Father, mother, the boys we drowned in games, the men I burned." Yara blew air through her nose. "Ghosts can't chew you, Theon. Euron can and will if we let him." She leaned her elbows beside his. "Last Raven from Pike says he's called a Kingsmoot. Every captain and priest summoned to Old Wyke to choose the next ruler." Her lips curled. "A farce, but the Isles lap it up. The lords will crown him. Maybe, unless you help me steal their cheers." She tapped 2 fingers against the rail, each a drumbeat. "You're Balon's son too, heir by rights older than the Driftwood throne. Stand with me against Euron, lend your tale of Winterfell redemption. Lore eats that up and we split the fleet between us. Isles for the north, north for the Isles." Theon looked at her. "Balon wanted salt wives and stone crowns. The north wants fields and peace. Will Harlaws and Blacktides follow such a banner?" Yara shrugged. "Some. Enough. Men follow winners." Wind pushed a lock of damp hair against her cheek. She brushed it back. "Bring me Winterfell's tides and Stannis' promise of pardon. I'll bring you hulls and spears. Together we gut the crow's eye before his song turns every deck red." Theon lowered his gaze to the waves, fracturing like hammered glass where keel met sea. "I'll speak," he said at last. "But if the priests choose you and not me." "They won't," she interrupted, then grinned. "You'll speak sweet, win hearts, and still be glad I wear the crown. That way I can pardon you when Northerners gripe about Ironborn." She punched his shoulder, brotherly, and strode away. He watched her descend toward the quarterdeck where steersmen braced the tiller. Yara's laugh rose above the groan of wood, a daring, fearless sound. For a moment he envied her surety. Then he squared his shoulders and sucked the bitter, cold air deep. Night crept across the sea like ink poured across parchment. One by one, lanterns winked into life along the rail, little yellow stars swaying. Theon turned aft and made for his cramped cabin under the forecastle. Inside, pitch oil lamps flickered, throwing knives of shadow. He unrolled stained parchment across a sea chest. a rough chart of the Iron Islands, drawn by White Harbor's mapright from memory and rumor. He tapped Pike, Old Wyke, Great Wyke, and Harlaw. The routes between them were sketched lines of hazard: whirlpools, reefs, shoals. He traced the coast of Old Wyke with a forefinger, lips murmuring silent prayers. If the Kingsmoot was indeed imminent, they had days, no hours, to rally captains still undecided. Footsteps stopped outside, a soft rap on the frame. He opened. A grizzled ironborn in mottled sealskin stepped in, Herrick Orkwood, once sworn to Balan, now Yara's bosun. The man's left eye was puckered shut by an old burn. The other was green and glinted like broken glass in lamplight. "Lady Yara says we may see sails on the morrow," he rasped. "If it's the Crow's Eyes scouts, she wants you on deck to show your face." Theon inclined his head. "Tell her I'll be there." Herrick lingered, green eye crawling over Theon's coat of stark gray wool trimmed with black fur. "A gift from Sansa. Stark colors look odd on a kraken," he muttered. "Some'll call you half-drowned traitor." "Let them," Theon responded, rolling the map. "I've been worse." Herrick grunted and left. Theon barred the door, sat on the edge of the sea chest, and rubbed the pommel of his short sword. Ghosts indeed waited on Pike. Father's disapproval, mother's distant grief, brothers dead in infancy, and the weight of every hostage year spent longing for home he later betrayed. But there was another ghost too. The boy Robb spoke of as brother, the boy Bran chased through Winterfell's towers, the boy who loved the way Sansa sang. A stark ghost inside a Greyjoy shell. He swallowed hard and blew out the lamps. Dawn bled pale behind Thunderheads when Maiden's reprieve slipped into Lordsport. The harbor smelled of tar, smoke, and cold iron. Warships jammed the piers, longships named for sharks and storms, their prows carved into snarling krakens. Theon counted banners. Scythes of House Harlaw, tridents of Botley, Black Mermaid of Merlin, a dozen others. But many masts bore ragged strips of dark blue silk embroidered with a single red eye, the Crow's Eye mark, Euron's mockery of the faith. His stomach tightened. Harbor watchmen waved Yara's ship alongside an open quay. Gangplanks clattered. Sailors coiled ropes, cursing the chill. Yara strode ashore first, her boots striking the weathered boards with confidence. Theon followed, surrounded by a wedge of reavers. Word spread in ripples. Balan's heirs are come. Heads turned, murmurs rising. At the quay's end loomed a tall, gaunt priest in water-dark robes, his beard dripping seawater. Strands of rotted kelp twined through it. Aaron Damphair, Theon recognized, once his uncle, now mouthpiece of the drowned god. His eye sockets were sunken hollows, but fanatic fire danced within. Around him clustered damp disciples holding driftwood staves topped with seashells. "Yara, Theon," Aaron intoned, voice like waves grinding bones. "The gods will calls you to Naga's bones on Old Wyke. There the Kingsmoot shall breathe life on salt and stone." "We sail with the tide," Yara replied. "But first Lordsport must know the Crow's Eye is not unopposed." Aaron's nostrils flared as if smelling rot. "Opposition is steel against storm. Storm shatters steel. Stannis' fire melts chains," Theon said, stepping forward. "And the North's wolves hunt in packs. Join us, uncle. Help free the Isles from Euron's ruin." Water dripped from Aaron's beard onto the quay. "You speak of fire and wolves," he rasped. "Yet the sea alone makes clean. Kneel, Theon, and be drowned again. Let the god judge if your lungs hold truth." Memories flared. Cold water flooding mouth and nostrils. Strong hands towing him back, Aaron's voice proclaiming, "What is dead may never die." Theon's chest tightened, but he shook his head. "I'll kneel to no salt water until Euron's blood stains it. The god may judge then." A flicker of surprise crossed Aaron's thin lips. Then he inclined his head the barest measure. "So be it. The god's tide will rise, washing all false crowns away." Yara barked a laugh. If drowning alone chose kings, every drunk sailor would rule. She swept past him toward a knot of watching captains. "Loose your ships from Euron's leash," she called. He'll lead you to doom, chasing dragons and distant crowns. Stand with Balan's blood and earn gold, raiding the Greenlands that rightfully should fear us. Some faces brightened, others tightened. Theon read the crowd. Botley men exchanged glances. They had lost kin to Euron's silence. Harlaw's master-at-arms stroked his beard thoughtfully. Yet many younger reavers, dazzled by tales of far seas, grinned at the mention of dragons. Theon stepped beside his sister and raised his voice. Brothers and sisters of the spray, hear me. I bled in Winterfell's snow and saw the price of folly. Mainland hosts will drown us in steel if we provoke their wrath now. But stand with me, and I'll bring trade with the north. Timber, grain, silver. We raid the Lannisters' coast when tide is right, not burn our home chasing shadows in Valyria. A fleet fed is a fleet feared. He drew breath. Faces stared back, some curious, some hostile. These were men who prized boldness. He must offer bold enough. Help us cut down the crow's eye, and we'll sail 10,000 oars south next season under Kraken and Wolf alike. We'll raid the Arbor, sack Old Town, riches for all. But first we claim our own shore. Murmurs rose. A few fists thudded shields. Not thunderous applause, but not scorn. Yara clasped his wrist, approval flickering in her eyes. A horn sounded uphill. On the rampart road came a procession. 50 men in rusted mail escorting a tall rider clad in black leather too fine for the Isles, lacquered red eye shining on his chest. A dusky woman led his horse. Her braids were wound with golden wire. Euron Greyjoy reigned at the quay's edge, single blue eye bright with mirth, patch of sable leather covering the left. Around his neck rested Valyrian steel armor wrought into a gorget of twisting faces. Little brother, little sister, he called in a voice as smooth as oiled silk. You grew like weeds in cracks of stone. Have you come to cheer my coronation? Yara's hand went to her axe haft. We come to end it. Euron's smile widened fisher slow. End what love begins? Ah, but storms love cliffs. He swung from the saddle, boots crunching grit. Every movement was effortless predation. I hold a bleeding star's favo. Our dear ones.
I grasp dragons, 4.
He hefted something from his belt. A curved horn banded in red gold, glyphs writhing along its flank. Sound this and armies kneel. A hush fell. Even Aaron's disciples shrank back. Theon's skin crawled. Old tales whispered of Dragonbinder, horn that shackled WRMS but burned lungs. Euron stroked its surface. Yet I seek not to command beasts, but men. His gaze roamed the gathered captains. Those who ride my storm will rule the seas. Those who cling to drowned logs. Well, driftwood floats until it rots. Boasts, Yara barked. Where were you when father needed sails off Lannisport, pillaging merchants in the Jade Sea? Only the brave kept pike afloat while you chased eastern whores. Laughter rippled.
Euron shrugged.
Every coin spent purchased knowledge. I return with secrets to make Krakens soar. He looked skyward, as if expecting wings. Then he faced the crowd. Captains, priests, thralls. Sail with me, and we will take the world that mocked us. Sail with Balan's timid whelps, and you'll spend your days trading grain like soft mainlanders. He turned on heel, remounted, and signaled his guard. They clattered back up the ramp, banners streaming. His words lingered like sour ale foam. Yara exhaled slow. He means to rouse them tonight. We must sail on the next tide. Aaron drifted forward. Stallion of storms or mare of caution, the Kingsmoot will choose. Prepare for drowning. He motioned his disciples, and they followed. The quayside dispersed. Herrick summoned reavers to load casks. Theon watched Euron's banners flutter vanish behind a headland. He felt the weight of coming trial pressing like chainmail soaked in seawater. That night, Maiden's Reprieve and 2 other cogs unfurled sails for Old Wyke. Moonless dark cloaked the sea. Only the lanterns along quarterdeck marked their passage. Theon stood at the stern rail, listening to water slap hull. Pounded hollow drum. He motioned squad to back flap. They slipped out, dragging horn between them. He followed last, pressing Melina down onto cushions. "Sleep," he whispered, and struck her temple with hilt. She crumpled. He ducked out as pavilion flaps stirred. Euron entered behind him, oblivious. The squad hurried across firelit clearing. A sailor glanced up, frowned. Theon hurled a knife, shaft buried in throat. They reached cliff path. Horn weighed heavy, but men bore it like sacred sin. Shouts erupted behind. Discovery. Arrows whistled, clacking rock. Theon felt one slice cloak. They barreled downward, feet sliding scree. Cliff base, boats bobbed. They leapt, shoved off, rowing madly. Torches blossomed above, illuminating Euron on ridge, shaking fist. Raven hair wild. A roar of incensed promise carried over wind. But water lay between. Oars bit, boats shot seaward. Arrows fell short. Theon exhaled, muscles trembling. He glanced at Horn swaddled at his feet. Even muted, it oozed menace. They rowed through black until Harlaw's outrider ship Ghost Shadow met them. Hauled boats aboard, sails unfurling to catch dawn breeze. Theon collapsed on deck, staring at paling stars. He had done it. Back at 10 Towers, Yara met them at quay, eyes shining. "You stole his thunder," she uttered. Theon drew cloth back. Runes flickered angrily. "Now we break it." Roderick emerged, cane tapping. "Better to smash sea serpent eggs than hatch them," he said. Together they bore Horn to forge built into cliff caves. Fires roared as blacksmiths stoked. Roderick explained. Valyrian horns were fused with spells of blood and fire. Break them and shards might still sing. They must melt. They hung Horn above crucible, added rare pyromancer's oils traded from Lys. Flames turned green, blue, white-hot. Runes writhed, shrieked in voices only dead could heed. Theon watched, jaw clenched, as the horn sagged and finally collapsed into glowing slag. A scream seemed to echo across waves. Perhaps imagination, perhaps Euron's rage carried on wind. When slag cooled to dull lump, Roderick sealed it in lead box, tossed into the deepest ocean trench off Harlaw's Cape. Theon stood at rail, watching splash bloom, feeling weight lift inside. Yara gripped his hand. "You cut Euron's wings. Now we clip his throat," he replied. Within days, banners of Harlaw, Blacktide, Botley, Drum, and Stonehouse flew side by side over a mustering fleet. 230 ships bristling with iron-tipped rams, sails patched and proud. Euron's supporters scrambled to fortify Pike. Ravens shrieked across isles. War drums beat across coves. Yet as Yara's fleet prepared to sail south into Ironman's Bay, a raven from Winterfell arrived, bearing Sansa Stark's seal. The parchment, hurriedly penned, chilled Theon. Winter grows darker. Reports of dead things moving beyond the wall prove true. Jon rides to gather every lord. Stannis marches north with what host he can. We beg the Iron Fleet, if still loyal to us, to bring men and grain to White Harbor before the snows sever seas. The true war approaches, one we cannot fight alone. Theon carried the letter to Yara aboard her flagship Black Wind. Candlelight flickered across her features as she read. She exhaled long. "Blood of the drowned," she whispered. "Euron can wait. The world can't." Roderick weighed options. Strike Pike now and enthrone Yara, or answer Northern Call and risk Euron consolidating. Debate raged among captains. Some jeered. Why help Greenland wolves? Others remembered Theon's words of trade, the hope of future plunder. Theon stepped onto drum deck amid captains, Sansa's letter in hand. He spoke, "I betrayed Winterfell once and saw it burn. I will not let Winterfell burn again, nor the world be consumed by shadow. The drowned god rules the deeps. The great other sends these cold dead to steal all life. If winter wins, our sons will drown in ice, not salt. Sail with me to White Harbor. Show the world Ironborn are more than reavers. We are krakens who choose our tides." He drew his sword, let point rest on plank. "If you would remain, remain, but my honor sails north." Silence. Then Herrick Orkwood stepped forward, battered shield in fist. "Black Wind to White Harbor." Another captain raised an axe. Wave Walker follows. One by one, names rang until most swore to course north. Only a handful, Botley and WNH men, refused. They slipped anchor in moonlight, bound for Pike to warn Euron. Yara clenched jaw but let them go. She turned to Theon. You just chose winter over islands. Hope the North remembers gratitude. He nodded. They will. Snow began to fall even at sea, flakes dissolving on rigging. The fleet raised anchors, sails blooming white against gray dawn. Rows of oars dipped as drums beat slow, mournful rhythm. Black wind led, prow cutting foam. Theon stood at stem with Sansa's letter folded close to heart. Yara beside him, arms crossed but eyes bright with challenge. Behind them, Harlaw's towers faded into mist. Ahead, northbound waves rolled endless, toward a world that might yet burn or freeze. At his feet, the empty space where Dragonbinder once lay shone clean. He thought of Winterfell's walls, of wolves and krakens fighting side by side beneath banners stitched new. He thought of Sansa waiting in snow, Jon forging alliances, Stannis marching. If ghosts still walked Pike's halls, they would wait a little longer. The gale freshened, black wind surged. The fleet flew like a dark arrow toward White Harbor, toward destiny, toward the beating heart of winter's war, where Theon Greyjoy would stand not as reek, not as monster, but as man remade by salt and snow, ready to pay his debts in blood and steel and, at last, in honor earned. Wind howled off the shivering sea as black wind's prow cut through iron-gray swells, a ragged parade of sails ghosting behind her. Snow danced across the deck in frantic spirals, dissolving on the dark oak like sparks on a smith's anvil. Theon felt the sting of it on his cheeks and tasted the brine that threaded every breath. Ahead rose the pale smear of the north, where White Harbor's granite walls crouched behind a frozen estuary, candles flickering faint within frosted windows. To port and starboard, more than 200 iron-borne hulls heaved and rolled, masts creaking, yards braced tight against a biting wind that carried scents of pine pitch and distant smoke. Somewhere beyond snow-choked hills, dead men marched, and every soul aboard these decks could feel the tremor of that darkness in the marrow of their bones. Yara stalked the forecastle, sealskin cloak snapping. "Strike colors," she barked, and men scrambled aloft to haul down the black kraken flags, hoisting in their place squares of drab gray cloth appliqued with a direwolf stitched in white. Not Stark banners precisely. Sansa had yet to send her own, but something close enough that Manderley bowmen on the harbor towers might hold their arrows. The gesture felt strange, an iron price paid in thread. Yet for the first time Theon watched his countrymen obey without grumble. Euron's shadow had chilled their songs. Winter's call now bound them tighter than salt ever could. The tide bore them toward the mouth of the White Knife, a broad tongue of slow water thick with pancake ice. Lanterns winked along the breakwater where Manderley galleys lay at berth, oars half-shipped. A hoarse cry drifted from the nearest tower. "Ship ahoy! Under the Wolf!" Horns blew 3 short blasts, caution, not alarm. Theon exhaled steady, gesturing to the drummer. A measured tattoo answered the code Davos had arranged. Allies bearing grain and steel. Moments later, the portcullis creaked skyward. Chains rattled, echoed by cheers across Black Wind's main deck. Beyond the mouth, White Harbor unfurled. Tiers of snow-heavy roofs rising around the new-built September of the Snows. Warehouses stacked with crates bound for Winterfell. Wharves busy despite the hour. Dockmen in fur-lined caps hustled to clear space. As Black Wind eased alongside, grapnels flew, mooring lines hissed. A gangplank thudded. Ice-rimed ropes strained, but the hull settled gentle against the pilings, as if the north itself sighed relief. Theon led the first shore party, boots crunching frost. Beside him, Herrick Orkwood carried a sea chest stuffed with parchment pledges, Harlaw's promise of sail, Blacktide's oath to ferry grain, Drum's tally of spearwives. At the quay's foot waited Ser Davos Seaworth, cheeks raw, beard grayer than Theon remembered. He clasped Theon's forearm. "Thought I'd never see Ironborn come bearing bread, not blades." "We brought both," Theon answered, lips quirking. "But the bread's for friends." Davos's eyes flicked to the towering masts in the river. A wonder that, Come, Lady Sansa receives you at New Keep. She'll want your tale by fire." His glance lingered on the bundled canvas Theon carried, a shard of the melted horn sealed inside an oak box. "And that, proof the crows I won't make dragons of us." Together they trudged toward the looming gatehouse where the wolf's head banner snapped among icicles. Inside New Keep's great hall, warmth rolled over them. Logs the girth of a man crackled in twin hearths, braziers hissed. Candles drenched vaulted beams in honey gold. Sansa Stark rose from a high-backed oaken chair beside the dais, hair a living ember in the firelight. She wore a gown of heavy gray wool trimmed with white fox, a direwolf brooch pinning her mantle. When she saw Theon, she stepped down, skirts whispering. There was no courtly flourish, no measured courtesy. She simply pulled him into an embrace. He stiffened, then let shoulders sag, inhaling the faint scent of cedar and winter roses. Over her shoulder, he glimpsed Jon Snow leaning against a pillar, half-smile ghosting his lips. Sansa released him, gaze roving the faces behind. "Lady Yara, Lord Roderick, captains all welcome. You come when the realm most needs courage." She gestured to the longboard table where maps of the north lay pinned under daggers. "Warm yourselves. We've news." They gathered, steaming mugs thrust into chapped hands. Jon greeted Yara with a warrior's clasp, eyes flickering to the iron-born axe across her back. "Glad you sailed. Watch who you swing that at." "Only dead men and worse," Yara drawled. At a nod from Sansa, Davos unfurled a parchment marked with fresh wax. "Scouts from Eastwatch report dead things breaching the gorge, pressing south by the King's Road. Tormund Giantsbane holds at Queen's Crown with wildling spears. Stannis marches from the Carhold, but roads vanish beneath storm." He tapped miniature stones, one shaped like a stag, another a direwolf, both arrayed between Castle Black and Winterfell. "If snows keep, they may not reach us before the dead." Roderick Harlaw frowned, long fingers brushing beard. "Numbers. Hard to know," Jon answered, his hair, grown longer, shadowed eyes dark with sleepless nights. "More than the Watch has ever seen. Thousands, maybe tens." He shifted a bone-carved piece shaped like a weirwood heart. "Every village they swallow swells their ranks." A hush settled. Outside, wind moaned beneath closed shutters like some vast beast sniffing for warmth and life. Yara broke silence first. "Then we fight here. Ironborn blades on the walls, northerners behind shield, dragonglass in every hand. Winterfell stands." Sansa's chin lifted. "Winterfell stands," she echoed, and the words resonated deeper than stone. Hours of council followed. Messengers dispatched to Torgood Vale for mountain clans. Ravens inked with calls to Hornwood and Barrowton. Theon spoke of fleet logistics. Grain unloaded daily, ships to run refugees from Bear Island's coves. Longships stripped of their masts to serve as barricades across the White Knife's shallows. Jon described obsidian caches Samwell Tarly had ferried from Dragonstone, crates now stacked in storeroom vaults. Yara offered 12 galleys fitted with mangonels to bombard whites along riverbanks. For every plan, someone countered a fear, and for every fear, someone forged a solution. As torches guttered low, hope glinted in exhausted eyes like embers refusing to die. Close to dawn, Sansa dismissed all but Theon, Jon, Yara, and Davos. Snow battered the shutters. She pulled Theon aside near the hearth where the flames painted their shadows across flagstones. "You did what you promised," she murmured, fingertips brushing the oak box. "This horn, whatever curse it once carried, is broken because you chose us." He met her gaze throat thick. "I'm not done choosing." For a heartbeat, only the fire spoke, spitting sap that hissed in the silence. Her hand tightened on his. Jon cleared his throat softly, and the moment passed, drifting into the smoke. 3 days later, Winterfell's yard thrummed with industry. The outer bailey teemed. Smiths beat dead men's helms into arrowheads tipped with dragonglass. Carpenters lashed wattle frames for trench palisades, and Manderley wagons groaned under sacks of barley. Ironborn drilled beside northern levees, 2 lines melding into one, Shields overlapped while hammers clanged on raised blades. At dusk, Theon watched a pair of Bear Island girls square off against a black-tide raider twice their weight. They dropped him with spears to the knee and a pommel crack under the chin. Laughter erupted, surprising in its brightness amid gathering gloom. Night fell early, black as pitch, yet torches along the battlements glowed like a necklace of molten gold. Theon climbed the ramparts, snow squeaking beneath boots. Above the east wall he joined Jon, who stared into darkness beyond the pale sweep of fields. In the hush between gusts, one could almost hear ghostly footfalls beyond tree line. Jon spoke first. "I once asked Maester Aemon how a man at the wall keeps faith when each dawn might be his last. He said, 'You keep it anyway, because the dawn needs you even if you never see it.'" Theon rested gloved hands on the parapet. "Then we keep it." He hesitated. "Jon, at Queen's Crown, when you ride to relieve Tormund, let me command the river flank." "You've given enough," Jon said softly. "Not yet." He thought of Ramsay's blades, of Bran's face when he fled Winterfell in smoke. "If I fall where I wronged you, defending it." Jon searched his face, saw the stubborn glint. Finally he nodded. "You'll have 100 spears, 2 mangonel barges. Hold the bends until I return or the last hearthfire dies." They clasped wrists. Above them the sky flickered with shards of emerald and violet, the northern lights dancing like banners of silent flame. Theon wondered if the dead saw them too, and if icy hearts felt wonder. Dawn bled red and gold through ragged clouds when the Winterfell host mustered. War horns brayed. Ravens rose startled from Merlin perches. Jon rode at the head of a vanguard of northern knights and freefolk, cloak of direwolf pelt streaming. Beside him galloped Davos and Tormund, the wildling lord having slipped through enemy lines 2 nights prior with a band of survivors. Yara's galleys, stripped for river fighting, rode upriver bearing barrels of pitch and caged ravens ready to blaze with wildfire if loosed. Theon took his position at Riverbend Watch, a half-ruined tower overlooking the White Knife's broadest ford. Ironborn archers lined plank walkways, dragonglass bolts stacked in baskets. Across the water, snow-laden pines whispered like conspirators. Hours crawled, cold gnawed ankles, frost-rimed beards. Midday brought no sun, only a diffuse glow cast through pewter cloud. Then came silence, an absence of gull cry, wolf howl, rustle. So complete the river seemed to hold its breath. And then a distant scraping. Theon raised a spyglass. Through blowing flakes, he saw ranks of corpses emerging from the treeline. Wights in ragged furs, some armored in frozen mail, eye sockets glowing faint azure. Among them lumbered giants of the old race, skin blue-white, ribs jutting where flesh had torn away. Their footfalls shook powder from branches. At the rear glided pale riders on dead horses, spear points glittering like starlight. Theon's stomach clenched. He lowered glass, voice steady as he ordered horns. The first volley of fire arrows arced, trailing sparks that extinguished against white ranks. But when shafts tipped with dragonglass found skull or heart, whites shattered like clay, powdered snow swirling through empty leathers. Giants kept coming. Theon signaled mangonels. Earthen pots of oil and pitch soared, smashing amid the throng, flames billowing green where wildfire found air. Some corpses ignited, stumbling ablaze. Others walked through fire untouched, ice flesh refusing to char. Water churned as the vanguard stepped onto the ford, half-frozen surface splintering beneath weight. Ironborn bows sang, shafts thudding shields of ice-rimmed wood. Yet the dead pressed, climbing over each other in mute frenzy. Soon the first line reached the near bank. "Spears!" Theon roared. A wall of ash wood and iron met skeletal claws. Men grunted, strained. Theon plunged into the fray, sword of northern steel shearing arm from shoulder. A white with antlers jutting from its helm smashed him aside. He rolled, came up stabbing, obsidian blade punching through mail. The white exploded in shards of frost. Above, archers loosed at riders picking vantage on ridge. An other, tall and slender, deflected a shaft with crystal spear, gaze like frozen stars fixing on Theon. Chill seeped through wool and iron, breath turning to snow. The other advanced, every step silent, spear tip leaving hairline fissures in frozen earth. Around them, fighting blurred into distant roar. Theon lifted shield, but would cracked under a single tap. He staggered, swung sword, a clumsy arc. The other swayed aside, spear darting. Theon felt male part, a cold kiss along ribs. Pain flared, but he snarled, driving forward into close grapple. To his horror, frost spiderwebbed along blade, weakening steel. Desperation surged. He drew the Valyrian dirk Yara had gifted, black metal drinking what little light pierced snowfall. He feinted left. When the other moved, he spun, burying dagger deep between breastbone shards. The crystal armor snapped like river ice in spring thaw. The spear clattered. A shriek sliced the wind, high and alien, before the other shattered into a storm of ice needles that scoured his cheeks. Instantly, half the whites within reach sagged lifeless, strings cut. That section of line faltered. Ironborn cheered ragged. Theon pressed a glove to bleeding side but did not yield ground, rallying spears to encircle remaining dead. They hacked, jabbed, held. Hours seemed to pass within heartbeats until horns upstream sounded 3 rapid notes. Jon's signal. Retreat south, field untenable. Theon gave orders. Men fell back in squads, covering each other. Mangonel barges, cargo spent, were scuttled. Tarred hulls lit so flames licked sky, casting green glare on snow. The bridge of fire forced whites to detour, buying precious minutes. By dusk, Riverbend Watch lay abandoned, walls aflame. Theon's rearguard limped along makeshift plank roads toward Winterfell's beacon. The wounded moaned, snow-clotted crimson beneath litters. Yara met them at the south gate with fresh healers and casks of mead. She gripped Theon when he stumbled, her fingers sticky with his blood. "That scratch?" she asked, voice brittle. "A love tap," he muttered, swaying. She snorted, half laugh, half sob, and helped him to Maester Coleman's tower. Inside, thin hands stripped armor, packed wound with hot wine and powdered yarrow. Pain roared white, then dulled to throb. Theon refused milk of the poppy, clarity mattered, but accepted a strap of leather to bite as stitches SL. ID flesh together. Above, bells tolled, Jon's host approaching. From the window Theon saw torch lines wind across snow, men straggling behind. Bastards and princes alike staggered shoulder to shoulder. Somewhere an elk's bugle called, Stannis' herald. They'd made it back. Council convened before midnight despite exhaustion. Jon stood by the hearth, cloak rhymed, eyes red. "Queen's crown fell before we reached it," he rasped. "We found only ashes and bones." He unrolled a map, finger stabbing at distances. "Dead will reach Winterfell before dawn 2 days hence." Stannis, face gaunt beneath iron-rimmed crown, nodded curtly. "We hold a castle or die." He surveyed room. Sansa at the high chair, Yara leaning against lintel, Roderick reading a vellum list of grain stores, Davos rubbing a stump of forearm. "Walls are strong, fire trenches dug. We have dragonglass in every quiver. Yet if the wall fell, so may stone." He turned to Sansa. "The choice is yours, Lady of Winterfell." Sansa's gaze swept them. The men who'd bled, the women carrying water buckets, the boys not yet grown shaving peach fuzz from chins. "Winterfell stands." She repeated it like prayer, and resolves hardened. "We fight at the walls." Jon exhaled, relief shading. "Then we faced dawn together." Dawn came steel blue, snow hammered ramparts, torches sputtered, shields iced. Theon paced the battlements despite bandaged side, cloak flapping. Ironborn archers huddled under mantlets. Northern men stood shoulder to shoulder, gripping dragonglass-dipped pikes, giant crossbows loaded crude iron quarrels dipped in obsidian shards. In courtyards behind, smiths stoked braziers of oil. Along parapets, barrels of pitch perched ready. A hush deeper than silence fell. Every heartbeat thundered in ears. Then from the tree line rose a distant pallid glow, as if moonlight condensed into smoke. It advanced, inexorable. Snowflakes halted midair, suspended in breathless hush, before swirling back toward the light like moths to unseen flame. Dead reached the trench first, rows of corpses tumbling into narrow moat of oil-soaked brush. Torches hurled by defenders ignited roaring wall of blue-green flame. Whites clawed blindly, igniting, stumbling. Others clambered over their burning kin, heedless, building ramps of charred bodies. Giants hurled great logs as bridges across trench. Some logs burst aflame but still bore ranks of zombies. Arrows rained. Theon fired until fingers cramped. Beside him Yara knocked shaft after shaft, cursing in Old Tongue. A bolt from Scorpion Ballista skewered a giant, sending it crashing into the trench, damming flames. Whites poured over its carcass. Drums beat to signal fallback to inner wall segment. Suddenly, a horn blast deeper, colder than any forged by man, rippled across the yard. Gates frosted white. Iron hinges groaned. From the swirl of snow rode a night king on a dead stallion, icy crown jagged as glacier peaks. Blue eyes locked on the battlements and on Theon. Time slowed to the breath between beats. Theon remembered Maester Luwin's lessons. Hold your fear as you hold a sword, tight but not tense. He drew breath. Snow whirled in eddies as the Night King raised an arm. Wind howled. The flames in trench guttered, then danced sideways, torn from fuel, snuffed in crackling hiss. Darkness rushed in. A roar thundered overhead, distant, but rising. Theon craned skyward. A shape like midnight wing unfurled through clouds, huge and swift, Drogon. On his back clung Daenerys Targaryen, silver hair whipping, eyes ablaze. Behind her on smaller pale dragons soared Regal with Jon astride, cloak a beating pennant. Fire burst from Drogon's maw, a torrent of searing orange that licked the trench alight again and swept through white ranks. Blue ice shattered beneath the blast. Screams of steam and cracking bone filled the air. Cheer rippled along walls, hope reborn. Dragons strafed, carving swathes of molten snow, incinerating hundreds. The Night King's gaze flicked skyward. He hefted a shard of glacial spear conjured from the air. Arm drew back. Theon shouted, but words vanished beneath gale. The Night King hurled. The spear streaked blue lightning. Regal banked. Jon clung tight. The spear grazed wing membrane, slicing, but dragons stayed aloft. Daenerys dove, Drogon's fire jetted. The Night King's mount reared as heat roared, yet he remained untouched. Below, whites surged again, driven by unseen will. Inner gates shook. Theon scrambled down stair to courtyard where northerners braced heavy beams. Giants hammered doors. Splinters flew. Theon rallied archers onto curtain wall, directing volleys into the breach. Yara led Ironborn with long axes to reinforce. A giant burst through at last. A dead thing, eyes blue, half its jaw gone. It swung massive fist, scattering men. Theon charged, ducked under a decaying arm, plunged obsidian spear into chest. The giant roared, flailing. Spear snapped, black shards embedding ribcage. Yara hacked hamstring. Bear Island girls scrambled up its back, stabbing base of skull with dragonglass daggers. The creature collapsed, shaking the courtyard like quake. But more poured in. Theon stabbed, slashed, slipped in blood. Pain in stitched side flared, yet he fought on. World narrowing to edge of blade, thudding heart. Across courtyard he saw Sansa on the great hall steps, bow in hand, loosing arrow after arrow with calm precision. Bran, blank-eyed, sat within a carved wheelwood throne guarded by wildling spears. Three-eyed raven. They whispered, bait to lure the Night King. Behind him, old weirwood heart, root of magic. A hush fell. The dead parted like tide around rock. Night King strode through gate, frost billowing cloak. Spears leveled, he ignored. Theon found himself standing between monster and Bran. Memories flashed, childhood games, laughter by hearth, betrayals, flames. He felt weight of every sin upon shoulders, yet felt also steel of every choice since. Bran's voice carried, soft yet firm. You must go, Theon. Run.
No, Theon breathed.
He hefted shattered spear haft, jagged with obsidian spike. Snow swirled, world silent but for thump of heart. Night King advanced, eyes infinite winter. Theon screamed wordless defiance and sprinted across blood-slick snow. He dodged one swipe of icy blade, planted feet, drove spear home. The point bit but glanced off crystal armor. Night King seized shaft, snapped it, backhanded Theon. Air left lungs. He crashed onto snow, pain fracturing ribs. Darkness edged vision, but he forced eyes open. Night King turned, stalking toward Bran. Then Drogon roared overhead, flame torrent bathing courtyard. The Night King raised hand. Fire parted around him, swirling harmless. But as the blaze cleared, Jon dropped from Regal's saddle, landing atop the heart tree's roots, long claw drawn. Sansa knocked arrow of dragonglass. Davos hurled an obsidian axe. It clanged fruitless. Theon crawled, inch by agonizing inch, toward a fallen spear. Snow melted under his blood. Behind, Yara rallied men, but walls crackled under assault. Defenders wavered. The Night King reached Bran, raising crystal sword. Bran looked up, serene. At that instant, a dire wolf howl split night. Ghost leapt from darkness, jaws clamping blue-white wrist. Sword clattered. Ghost yelped as frost tore flesh, but grip held long enough for Jon to surge forward, long claw flashing. Valyrian steel met ice. A crack like shattering glaciers echoed. Night King reeled, sword arm severed below elbow. Sansa's arrow flew, burying deep in chest. The tip glowed, ice steaming. Bran's eyes widened, pupils white as he warged into ravens swirling overhead, channeling ancient power. Roots of the heart tree glowed crimson. The courtyard shimmered with faint shapes, echoes of kings long dead. Their voices rose in wind, chanting words lost to Southron tongues. The Night King snarled, face fracturing spiderweb across cheek. Jon drove Longclaw into rift. With a sound like icebergs colliding, the Night King exploded into a blizzard of shards. A shockwave whooshed outward, knocking men to knees. Everywhere dead things collapsed, lifeless once more. Silence. Only crackle of dying flames. Moans of wounded, sob of wind. Theon lay on his back, snowflakes drifting onto lashes. Above, clouds parted, revealing a sky flushed pale rose, the first hint of dawn. Jon knelt beside him. "You fought to last breath. Not dead yet," Theon rasped, attempting smile. Sansa appeared, tear tracks carving soot-smeared cheeks. She pressed cloth to his wound. Bran, tears silvering along temples, murmured, "You're a good man, Theon." A breath he'd held half his life escaped. Pain ebbed to dull throb. Around them survivors rose, triumphant yet broken. Dragons circled overhead, sending gusts of ash and snow swirling. Days later, the fallen were burned on pyres stretching half a mile beyond Wintertown. Flames painted the night golden, sparks rising like stars reborn. Theon stood with bandaged ribs, arm in sling, beside Sansa and Yara. They watched columns of smoke carry names into sky. At dawn, a raven from Pike arrived. Euron's fleet shattered by a storm, silence sunk, survivors scattered. Roderick read the parchment aloud. Cheers mingled with morning hush. Yara's shoulders sagged in quiet relief. The Isles were hers to rebuild without blood of kin or crow. In Winterfell's Godswood, Sansa and Jon gathered all chiefs. Stannis, Roderick, Yara, Davos, Tormund. Beneath the ancient heart tree they pledged an oath of ice and salt. Never again would Ironborn raid north. Never again would North starve Isles. Trade would bridge waves, wolves and krakens guarding coasts together. As witness, Bran spoke prophecy. Long nights will come and go, but as long as unity holds, dawn finds a way. His eyes, ageless, settled on Theon. Balance is redressed. When the feast of renewal filled the halls, Theon lingered at ramparts, watching sunrise stain snowfields peach and gold. Children chased each other below, laughter echoing off fresh-laid stones. He touched the rough mortar, his hands had hauled those blocks. He thought back to the boy who burned Winterfell and the man who saved it, and knew both lived within him like tide and moon. Yet the sea now looked less tempest, more horizon. Footsteps. Sansa joined, cloaked in wolf trim. "You should feast." He smiled, small. "Soon. I wanted to watch the dawn I fought for." She laid hand over his. "You earned it." Winterfell remembers. In distant pens, dragons beat wings, their silhouettes against brightening sky like living heraldry of a world reborn. Bells tolled for morning service. Smith hammers rang anew, life stirring where death nearly triumphed. Theon inhaled crisp air, salt mingling with pine. "What is dead may never die," he murmured, "but rises harder and stronger." Sansa's gaze held his. "And so have you, Lord Greyjoy." Together they watched sun climb over battlements, its rays catching snow crystals until the whole world glittered. In that light, past and present fused, not erased, but woven into a story of redemption no horn could shatter, no winter erase. The sea still called, the north still beckoned, and between them stood Theon Greyjoy, bridge of salt and snow, finally whole. Snowmelt dripped in silver threads from the crenellations of Winterfell's rebuilt outer wall, the rivulets tracing narrow paths over fresh-laid stone. With every drop, Theon Greyjoy felt the weight of ice receding, slowly, stubbornly, but receding all the same. 10 days had crawled by since the pyres, 10 dawns gilded in pale spring light, and the fortress was no longer only the bastion that survived the dead. It had become a living workshop, a forge of new purpose in every courtyard, alley, and storeroom. Before first light each morning, masons measured out lime and gravel, mixing mortar in great troughs. While Fletchers scraped goose quills smooth for the next supply of arrows no one dared believe they would never again need. Theon walked among them, arms still in linen sling but ribs knitted enough to let him breathe without a wince. Ironborn carpenters he'd once seen cheerfully torch Reachman grain barns now labored side by side with Manderley millwrights to carve a fleet of sledges. The great drifts had begun to slump, and the world that winter drowned was pushing stubborn shoots of green through the slush. Soon roads would be mud, not ice. Soon caravans from White Harbor and Barrowton could roll again with barley, flax, and iron. And soon, Theon knew, eyes farther south would turn once more to the north. He paused on the covered walk above the east gatehouse, letting the rising sun warm his cheeks. Its rays caught in the banner newly raised only the night before, wolf rampant quartered with a black kraken, the sea creature's curling arms entwined around the direwolf's foreleg in a rough-hewn symbol of their new pact. It had been stitched in haste by a dozen hands in a tower chamber where fans of candle smoke blackened the plaster walls. Sansa herself had traced the initial design on canvas, her neat seamstress training growing more confident with each pass of the needle, until at last she'd stepped back, eyes bright. When Theon had thanked her, she'd only shaken her head and said, "A banner's nothing without the men who bleed for it." But he'd seen pride there. Below, the main courtyard rang with the clash of practice blades. A Bear Island girl, Mara, he'd learned, sparred against a hulking Iron Holt Reaver named Black Yorgan. For weeks ago, they might have tried to slit each other's throats without preamble. Now Mara ducked Yorgan's heavy cut and riposted with a flick that tapped his helm, drawing not blood but a bark of laughter. To the left, wildling spearwives drilled with archers from Deepwood Motte, sharing tips on stalking elk that an archer swore would help her slip through northern pine as soundlessly as any spearwife through the snow. And in the corner by the well, 2 quiet-robed acolytes of the Red God murmured over a brazier whose coals glowed like garnet. A small concession to Lord Stannis' favored priestess, though the northerners kept a wary eye on every spark. Footsteps scraped behind him. Jon Snow emerged from the stairwell, cloak snapping in a breeze that smelled faintly of thawed earth and pine tar. His dark hair had grown ragged around the collar of his simple leather jerkin. A new scar crossed his left cheek like a pale rope. He surveyed the training yard with the grim satisfaction of a farmer counting winter stores at last enough to see spring. When he spoke, his voice held gravel. "Looks different with the dead gone," he said. Theon dipped his chin. "Still too quiet at night. I wake listening for the scraping of claws." Jon's mouth twisted in rueful understanding. We all do. He leaned on the stone. Stannis rides for King's Landing in 2 days. Half his Baratheon men go with him. He wants the Ironborn to ferry them to Gulltown first. Fastest route, Theon agreed. The Mander and Blackwater are still choked with drift ice. Yara's longships can slice what remains. Will she agree? Jon turned to meet his eyes. She will, Theon answered. She'd sooner sail south than sit idle. The Isles need plunder again, she says, but honest plunder. Whatever that is to an Ironborn mouth. He exhaled mist. And she wants to prove to the lords here that our word holds. Their gaze shifted to the new banner again, flapping bravely. A raven croaked overhead, wings beating as it banked toward the rookery tower. You'll sail with her? Jon asked. Soon, but first I promise Sansa and Bran one more council on the harbor works. We lost half the harbor chain to ice. He flexed his uninjured hand. Menderley will lend the smelters, but we'll need every scrap of iron we can salvage from Euron's wrecks. I'll sail those barges down the White Knife myself if I must. A small smile ghosted Jon's lips. From burning Winterfell to rebuilding it. Maester Luwin would have liked that. The smile faded softly. I'm glad you lived to see it, Theon. The weight of that simple statement settled warmly on Theon's shoulders. In the dark hours after the Night King fell, he had believed he'd die within the night. His veins frozen by that ice spear wound, his heart easing at last. Yet dawn had come, and with it Maester Coleman's capable needles and Jera's steady hand guiding Poultices's ground from Fenleaf and Foxglove. Slowly he'd clawed back life again. He still felt that stubborn pulse beating in his side like an echo of that miracle every time he climbed a stair too quickly. Luwin always said the gods give us leave to change, he murmured. I thought I'd squandered it. Jon laid a calloused hand on his shoulder. The 7 hells of regret burn brighter than any forge. But what comes of the forge is stronger than what went in. He squeezed once, then straightened. Walk with me, Bran asked for both of us. They descended stone steps to the Godswood. The heart tree loomed sage and crimson among budding birches, its weeping grooves dark with early sap. Bran Stark sat beneath the heart tree's face, wheelchair drawn back onto a bed of brown needles. A raven perched on the carved brow above him, its head cocked. Bran's eyes, endless and uncanny, settled first on Theon, then Jon, as though measuring time in the span of their footfalls. Spring, he said simply, voice mild and distant. So they tell us, Jon replied. It's coming faster than expected. The snows will recede down to the Barrowlands within 3 moons. Bran's gaze drifted, perhaps seeing meltwater racing between distant stones none of them could see. And from the south rides another kind of storm. Theon felt a cold prick at the back of his neck. Cersei's still on the throne? Cersei has fled. Bran's eyes refocused. A last raven from Tarth says she boarded a Lysine warship with the Golden Company's pay chests. Their elephants never set foot on Westeros, but their coin did. She means to raise fresh banners in Myr and return when the realm tires of war. Euron's storm scattered part of her fleet, but a clever rat finds cracks in any hull. Jon's jaw tightened. Then Stannis must take King's Landing quickly. A queen and a Sellsword army in exile is a blade at our neck. And the one who burns behind him? Theon asked. He thought of Daenerys Targaryen strafing the dead with dragonfire, a vision of wrath and grace. What of the Dragon Queen? She camps at Storm's End, Bran said. Her unsullied hold the walls until Stannis' host arrives. Rhaegal and Drogon hunt off the coast, waiting on vultures drawn by burnt bones to swallow. Fancy council words. Came a new voice behind them, but plain truth. Yara Greyjoy emerged through the willow splay, oil-stained cloak draped across one shoulder. She bowed her head at Bran, half deference, half curiosity, then jerked her chin at Jon. 200 hulls readied, snow. Pike smiths melted their last catapult stones to plate the prows. Give the word. Jon inclined his head. You'll have it at dawn. Good. I itch for sail. She slapped Theon's good shoulder. Brother, if you miss our tide for some council scribble, I'll lash you to the mast myself." He snorted, as stern as ever. Yara's grin flashed. "Reforged, not tamed. But I'll not keep you. Lord Stark, Bran." She tucked an errant braid behind one ear and vanished the way she came, boot prints muffled in wet needles. When her steps faded, Bran spoke again. "The deep seeing shows 3 roads now. One ends with a Kraken's flag buried in sand far south, another with the wolf's banner alone atop a melted throne, and the last with both banners bound so tight they cannot be sundered without tearing the cloth in two. And which is best?" Jon asked. "Which will grow the deepest roots?" Bran countered. "Ask the heart tree. It knows how to survive axe or flame." Jon exhaled. "A riddle for a peacetime I'm not sure we'll earn." He turned to Theon. "Ride with me to Moat Cailin before you sail? The king wants ironborn engineers to repair the causeway forts. No one better at walls than reavers." Theon dipped his head. "Gladly, but first counsel." He faced Bran. "You said my road splits with the banners. If I'm to stitch them together, tell me how." Bran's eyes slipped half-lidded. The raven cawed softly. "You'll see an island of weeping stones before the Kraken's home. Leave your sword there, and when you stand before a queen with tears on her cheeks, do not kneel first, listen." Theon blinked. An island of weeping stones? But Bran had closed his eyes, drifting back to wherever ravens and roots carried his mind. Jon squeezed Theon's arm. "Cryptic as ever. We'll parse it later." They left Bran with the silence of the godswood, walking back toward the bailey where the smith's hammers rang steady as heartbeat. In the days that followed, preparations sped like a river freed of ice. Wounded men bound stumps with boiled leather and insisted on joining the work crews. Theon found himself at the harbor's frozen quays, charting how to drive pilings in thaw-soft silt for new jetties, using broken masts from silence as foundation spires. The wood still smelled of Euron's pitch and salt rot, an eerie echo of the horn that had once promised doom. But as each plank slid into place under northern hammers, the stink lessened. Salt water washed it clean. On the eve of departure, Sansa joined Theon at the harbor where black wind bobbed. Her cheeks were rosy from the chill, her cloak lined with marten fur. In her gloved hands she carried a scroll, sealed with the direwolf Kraken stamp. "Letters for Davos to bear to Gulltown," she said. "And this." She produced a much smaller parcel wrapped in oiled linen. "A token for Yara, Winterfell's thanks." Theon accepted both. "She'll sneer," he said, but his smile wavered with affection. "Yet she'll keep it in her sea chest hidden." As they walked the quay, gulls wheeled overhead, their cries sharper, hungrier than ravens. Sansa stopped by a bollard crusted with ice. "I wish I could sail north with the fleet," she murmured. "The sea is not kind to landsmen," he replied. Her gaze caught his, frank. "I've stood against more fearsome waves than salt water." She sighed. "But duty keeps me here. I swore to hold Winterfell for every house that shed blood on these walls." Her grip on the scroll's trap tightened. "And for the dead under them." "You'll hold it," he said, certainty threading his words. A moment passed, filled by water lapping hulls. Then she stepped closer and kissed his cheek. Light, quick, but it left him burning. She leaned back, cheeks pinker. "Come back with fair winds, Lord Greyjoy." He bowed his head. "I will, Lady Stark." The sailors called the last boarding. He hurried up the gangplank. Yara stood at the quarterdeck shouting orders. Sails spilled like unfurling wings, snaps of canvas echoing. As the moorings were cast off, Theon gazed down. Sansa still stood on the quay, slim as a birch, face lifted. He raised a hand. She mirrored it until fog swallowed her. Black wind glided down the white knife, oars dipped, glinting. The riverbanks blurred, wood smoke drifting from villages where people began to believe in spring. The fleet followed, a ragged formation of kraken-prowed longships and squat grain cogs. Sailors sang soft ballads older than any maester's parchment, songs of lonely seas and yearning home. Theon stood near the prow, thoughts drifting to Bran's riddle. an island of weeping stones. Pike itself was an island fortress. But weeping stones? He closed his eyes. In Ironborn lore, there was a place called the Widow's Isle, a barren rock between Great Wyke and the rills where bridal widows were sent down the centuries, castaways of salt and grief. The waves carved hollows in the cliffs that looked like screaming mouths. Legends named it the Isle of Sobs. Could that be Bran's weeping stone? He shivered. 3 days of rowing and lateen sailing brought them out to Ironman's Bay. Even in calmer seas, the swell heaved the decks, reminding every man that spring's kindness ended where the deep began. The sky brooded pewter. Seabirds screamed. Yet above Pike's cliffs, a dawn of soft rose stretched when they arrived, painting the basalt spires less menacing. Yara led Black Wind through the narrow arch that split Nettle's Head, a passage known only to captains born on salt. The smaller longships fanned into the roiling channel beyond, steering for Lordsport's harbor. As sailors tied off, Theon noticed a crowd lining the quay. Hundreds awaited. Women in sealskin cloaks, orphans perched on rope fenders, gaunt men in patched mail. They raised no cheers, only watched with wariness that might turn to awe or anger. Yara strode down the gangplank clad not in battle mail but a plain wool surcoat bearing the new wolf-kraken patch on her breast. A hush fell. Then a deep voice rumbled, "Blood of Balan returns." Theon turned to see Dunstan Drum, Lord of Old Wyke, limping forward with a whalebone hilt at his side. His grizzled beard was frost-white. He bowed his head to Yara. "Your queen's crown waits." But before Yara could answer, a tremor in the crowd parted them like surf. A woman emerged, hair gray as gull feathers, wearing black mourning lace over blues packed with golden thread. Phalia Flowers, once Euron's paramour, now unmoored and hollow-eyed. In her hands glinted the weapon Theon recognized, a crude bronze dagger that had belonged to Harris Harlaw, another victim of Euron's ambition. She lifted it toward Yara. "It's Piney," she whispered, meaning who rules? In the thick dialect of the lonely light. Then she flipped the dagger and stabbed it into the dock timbers. Not the eye, not the crow. Tears traced salt down her cheeks, glistening. "Rule us, daughter of Balan. End the sobs." Sobs, weeping stones. Theon's breath caught. Yara knelt, fingers wrapping the hilt. She pulled the blade free, wiped it across her sleeve. Blood had dried in the fuller, Euron's or Harris's, none could tell. But she sheathed it at her belt as though washing the island's wound. Then she helped Phalia rise and kissed her brow. A whisper rippled through the crowd like wind across dune. Some lowered heads. Others thudded shield boss to peer. It grew into a low chant. "Yara, Yara." In that moment Theon felt Bran's vision thread another stitch. Yara's acceptance by the widowed mistress of the Sob Isle was the beginning of healing centuries-old torment. Theon caught Yara's eye. She tilted her chin, a silent thanks. That night, a Kingsmoot convened again, not on Naga's bones beneath storm, but within the halls of Pike's great keep. Banners of every surviving house hung side by side. There were no dragon horns, no priests forcing drowning. Theon stood by Yara as Roderick Harlaw read a new law of succession drafted in careful cramped letters. A queen chosen not only by salt and stone, but by the will of captains tempered by counsel with allied lords. When Roderick finished, every captain present slapped chest in the old way, embracing decision. No one lifted horn or voice in challenge. The roar that followed shook the cliff foundations more deeply than any gale. And yet, in the dimmer halls beyond, Theon saw the ragged edges of war, the orphans of lords huddling near hearths, eyes rimmed red, the fishermen whose nets had been cut by Euron's taxes, wondering where the next catch might come from. He walked among them, listening. As he moved, a few spat at his boots. Others touched his sleeve with quiet hope. Each face reminded him that winning swords was easier than winning hunger. In the morning, he sailed with a dozen longships west to Great Wyke and the Widow's Isle. As Black Wind rounded the jagged headland, he saw the legend for himself. Caves pocked the sea cliff like the eyes of skulls, water streaming from them as if the stone wept. The sailors whispered about ghosts. Theon ordered a skiff lowered. Alone, save a single rowing oarsman, He approached the cliff, leapt to a slick ledge, and climbed. Wind keened through the hollows, an unearthly wail that deadened his ears. Within a narrow fissure, he found an alcove no man's boot had marked in a generation. A natural altar of tide-smooth basalt, its basin filled with seawater clear as dawn. He drew his sword, the northern gift that had saved his life, and laid it on the altar. The water lapped its blade, drawing a thin line of silver across steel. He spoke aloud, voice trembling. For Robb Stark, who took me as a brother. For the farm boys I burned, I name them brothers too and beg their ghosts. For Maester Luwin, who healed me with patience I did not deserve. For every soul that bled at Winterfell's fall. For Yara, who bore weight I should have shared. I lay this steel so 1,000 ships might sail to feed the isles and shield the north. He stepped back, tears burning. Yet as they fell they mingled with the sea and became indistinguishable. The sword gleamed faintly, then seemed to darken, as if the island swallowed its light. He left it there, turning without regret. The climb down felt lighter. When he returned, the sailors looked at his empty scabbard with question in their eyes. He only said, "I'll forge another, together with everything else." None asked more. Over the next fortnight, the Iron Islands transformed like thawing earth. Yara's first decree outlawed salt wives, granting children of those unions full inheritance rights. It was met with outrage by some lordlings, but the memory of dead tyrants muted them. Her second decree suspended reaving against the northern coast, redirecting raiders to escort grain convoys between Torrens Square and Pike in exchange for timber shipments. Menders in Maiden's Tower stitched kraken badges with a tiny wolf's head over the heart, and men wore them proud. Theon oversaw the salvage of Silence, her hull broken on the rocks where storms drove her. They melted her bronze figurehead, a screaming eye, into nails and bolts for the harbor chain. Shipwrights at Lordsport tested new cranes to lift drought-season cargo. Theon's sketches, mocked by some as child scribbles, proved cunning when pulleys groaned but did not snap. Yet whispers of Cersei Lannister's escape spread like mold. News drifted of Sell-Sail fleets forming beyond the stepstones, of Myrish forges hammering bright new swords. The realm's wounds might scab but not scar yet. Letters from Sansa came by raven every few days, terse but warm. She spoke of Bran's visions guiding Moat Caelin's fort works, of Jon and Daenerys besieging the Red Keep where Stannis raised a stag banner beneath dragon wings, of Davos meeting with the High Septon to plan food relief for the Crownlands. And in every letter she wrote 3 words he never tired of reading: "The North endures." One evening as gulls cried and the sunset bled vermilion beyond the 12 towers, Theon stood on Pike's sea tower balcony. Yara joined him, hair whipping. Below, the surf slammed dark rocks with tireless desire. "Ravens from King's Landing," she said, handing him a parchment. "Dawn might break there, too." He read. Stannis' army breached the city. Cersei fled beyond grasp. Daenerys' dragons perched on the Sept's shattered dome to quell riots. A council of lords considered calling a great council to choose a new ruler untainted by dragonfire or lion's roar. The North's voice would be asked. The Isles as well, perhaps. He folded the parchment. "Politics," he said. "More dangerous than water," Yara agreed. He rested forearms on the salt-sticky rail. "If a council is to choose who sits the throne, I want Sansa's name spoken." He half expected Yara to laugh. Instead, she considered. "A queen who kept her castle when ice tried to swallow the world," she said. "A wolf with steel enough to trust a kraken." She shrugged. "Better than some bastard upstart." Jon's face flickered in his mind. Loyal, burdened. He shook his head. "Jon wants no crown. He'd put it on her head himself." Yara snorted. "Then perhaps the realm needs to remember women can rule without playing dragons against wildfire." She clapped his back. "Sail soon, brother. The North will need your voice to shout loud." A horn echoed from the harbor. The first convoy from White Harbor had arrived, fat-bellied cogs laden with smoked cod, barley flour, and barrels of dark beer. As the sun slipped below the horizon, lanterns glimmered on restless water, reflecting gold flickers back at the jagged towers like stars come home. Theon breathed salt air deep, feeling ribs stretch without pain. He thought of a road that began in shame, wound through fire and ice, and brought him here, still uncertain but walking. Tomorrow he would board Black Wind again, setting sail up the Bight to Winterfell, then south to King's Landing with grain escorts and a pledge of steel from isles once sworn only to plunder. Maybe along that road the realm would weave a banner no blade could sever, wolf and kraken and dragon and stag stitched into one cloth. But for now he watched the harbor lights and listened to the hush between waves, where the drowned god's roar once deafened him. In that hush he heard instead the faintest murmur of spring, the creak of a mooring rope, the thrum of carpenters planing deck planks, a distant laugh from a sailor whose nightmares had begun to fade. They were small sounds, almost fragile, yet he understood as the heart tree understood. Small sounds, given time, could grow into forests. He stayed until the last light died, then turned inland toward the great hall where captains drank to new covenants. Behind him the waves kept crashing, but in their rush there was no longer the promise of cruel tides. Only the steady, patient rhythm of a world remade by salt, snow, and stubborn hearts that dared to beat after winter. And somewhere, far beyond that dark horizon, dawn waited to paint fresh banners across the sky.